Have you ever wondered why some countries, overflowing with natural resources, remain stuck in an economic rut? Imagine a country with vast reserves of oil and gas, a young and educated population, and a strategic location at the crossroads of Asia and Europe. Sounds like an economic success, right? Well, that's Iran. It's home to more than 89 million people, with holding the world's fifth largest copper reserves and ranking among the top producers of zinc and lead. It has the second largest reserves of natural gas in the world, only behind Russia, and it has the fourth largest reserves of oil in the world. Economies need the factors of production like land, labor, and capital, and Iran has them all. Iran's GDP is $386 billion, which is $4,418 on a per capita. Its GDP ranks lowly 42 in the world, far behind its neighbors with similar resources. So what's holding this nation back? The answer is a complex web of internal and external challenges. Let's untangle this first by looking inward. From 1980 to 1988, Iran's economy was all about fighting Iraq. They took over most industries and even grabbed assets from Iranian citizens who didn't agree with the government's goals. Giving them to something called bonyads, or foundations, are like big charity organizations in Iran. They're a huge part of Iran's economy, controlling about 20% of its money, which is almost as much as the oil industry in Iran. The biggest one is called the Mostazafan Foundation, and it's worth around $12 billion. Many towns have their own bonyads connected to local religious leaders. These organizations don't have to listen to anyone except the supreme leader of Iran. They don't have to pay taxes and get a lot of subsidies from the government, which is a problem for Iran's economy. They also sometimes sell things illegally, which makes the situation worse. Before the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the bonyads were originally set up by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as charitable organizations, but they were criticized for mainly serving the interests of the ruling elite and keeping the Shah in power. They acted more like secretive companies than genuine charities, investing heavily in luxury projects like the Kish Island Resort, which didn't benefit the poor. Bonyads are criticized for being a huge waste of Iran's resources. They're seen as overstaffed, corrupt, and often not profitable. In fact, in 1999, it was reported that 80% of Bonyad companies were losing money. Because of their political connections, Bonyad companies have an unfair advantage over private businesses, making it hard for the private sector to compete. This hurts healthy economic competition and growth. Additionally, the significant influence of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, in various economic sectors creates an environment that can be opaque and unpredictable for foreign investors. The IRGC's involvement in sectors like construction, energy, and telecommunications can raise concerns about transparency and accountability, making it difficult for private businesses to compete on a level playing field. Overall, instead of serving the poor, bonyads are seen as serving the interests of the ruling regime and its supporters. Another hurdle for Iran's economic growth is the underutilization of its talented workforce. More than half of Iran's workforce is made up of women. But due to social restrictions, many women struggle to find jobs, hindering the country's overall productivity. Prior to the 1979 revolution, Iran witnessed rapid economic growth. Fueled by oil revenues, Iran's GDP soared by an average of 10% annually in the 1960s and early 1970s. This economic boom transformed Iran, with investments in infrastructure and industry leading to a significant rise in living standards. Now, let's move beyond Iran's borders. A major factor crippling its economy is sanctions. Since the Iranian Revolution, the West has imposed a series of sanctions. These sanctions restrict Iran's ability to trade with other countries and access the global financial system. International sanctions imposed on Iran slashed its oil exports by over 50% in just a few years. This, coupled with political instability, created a challenging economic environment. In 1979, the US imposed sanctions on Iran after Iranian students seized the American embassy in Tehran and took Americans as hostages. These sanctions were lifted in 1981 with the release of hostages. Since then, the US has imposed various sanctions on Iran due to concerns about its nuclear program and support for terrorist groups. In 2018, President Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal and reinstated sanctions. The EU countered US sanctions by enacting a blocking statute. Subsequent sanctions targeted Iran's financial sector and individuals involved in its defense programs. Also, UN sanctions on Iran aimed to pressure it to suspend nuclear activities. Most were lifted in 2016 under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. However, the US failed to extend an arms embargo against Iran, which expired in 2020. Efforts to restore UN sanctions on Iran faced opposition, with many Security Council members disagreeing with the US's stance. As a result, Iran regained the ability to purchase foreign weapons and military equipment after the arms embargo expired. In 2020, Iran was put on a blacklist by FATF, a global organization against money laundering. Also, this time, an embargo on selling weapons to Iran ended, as agreed in the 2015 nuclear deal. In April 2021, the EU sanctioned 8 Iranian officials for human rights abuses. In September 2023, France, Germany, and the UK decided to keep some sanctions in place to discourage Iran from selling drones and missiles to Russia. Sanctions imposed by the US and EU on Iran have had significant economic and social effects. Iran's oil-dominated economy has been hit hard, with declining oil exports and limited access to technology and investments in the energy sector. Iran has attempted to circumvent sanctions through measures like using front companies and barter trade system. In barter trade system countries, exchange their products instead of using US dollar. In response to economic pressure, Iran has focused on building a resistance economy, reducing imports and seeking alternative trading partners. Recent secondary sanctions imposed by the US on Chinese and Indian entities further complicate Iran's economic situation. Imagine Iran trying to participate in the global economic marketplace with its hands tied behind its back. It's incredibly difficult. However, there was a brief period of relief in 2012 when sanctions were eased. During this time, Iran's GDP actually showed signs of growth. This just highlights the potential that's waiting to be unlocked. In response to Western sanctions, Iran has been strategically forging new economic partnerships, most notably with China. This diversification of trade partners helps lessen the impact of sanctions by creating new markets for Iranian goods and services. However, relying too heavily on a single partner like China can introduce new vulnerabilities. For instance, China's economic slowdown could have a ripple effect on Iran's economy. Additionally, Iran may not have as much leverage in negotiating trade deals with a single dominant partner. The impact of sanctions and internal issues like the Barads has been devastating. Iran's GDP ranking plummeted from 15 to 42 in just a few decades. Imagine the missed opportunities, the unrealized potential for a nation brimming with resources and a bright young population. So we can't ignore the burgeoning technology and innovation sector. Iran boasts a young and tech-savvy population, with over 60% having access to the internet. The government is actively investing in this field, with a focus on areas like artificial intelligence and renewable energy. This focus on innovation could be a game changer, propelling Iran towards a more diversified and knowledge-based economy. Additionally, the government has focused on developing domestic industries to reduce dependence on imported goods. This focus on self-sufficiency, while born out of necessity, has fostered the growth of certain sectors within the Iranian economy, such as the production of home appliances and pharmaceuticals. It's important to note that the impact of sanctions is a complex issue. While they undoubtedly create obstacles, they have also pushed Iran to innovate and explore alternative economic paths. The development of a domestic manufacturing base and a focus on non-oil exports are testaments to this innovative spirit. The potential easing of sanctions on the horizon presents both challenges and opportunities for Iran's economic future. The return of access to global markets could lead to a surge in growth, but Iran will also need to adapt to increased competition. The truth is, the Iranian leadership faces a complex dilemma. Economic growth often leads to a more empowered populace, which might challenge their grip on power. This creates a tension between wanting a strong economy and maintaining control. However, Iran has the potential to be an economic powerhouse. If it can overcome these challenges, both internal and external, a brighter future awaits. With its vast resources and talented people, Iran could become a major player in the global economy. So, the next time you hear about Iran, remember this: it's a nation of immense potential, struggling to break free from the chains of internal obstacles and external pressure. Only time will tell if Iran can overcome these hurdles. If you found value in this video and learned something new, share it with your friends, because we believe that everything is human and geography boundaries don't matter. If you want to stay updated with more such content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. And if you enjoyed this video, show your support by giving us a thumbs up. Remember, every like, share, and comment fuels our motivation to bring more such exciting content your way. So don't hesitate to join the conversation in the comments section below. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious.